There's been a lot of discussion, of course, lately over, of all things, booing the national anthem at hockey games, for example. It's happened in Montreal. It's happened in Toronto. All this, of course, to do with what's going on now between Donald Trump and tariffs and everything else. And it seems this is how some Canadians have decided to take it up. But more interestingly, it does bring up one other question. Why are we playing national anthems at these events in the first place? And is it time for that to stop? Michael Naraine is an associate professor of sports management at Brock University. He is on the line. Michael, let me begin by asking the question. Okay, from the perspective of tradition, if I can call it that, this discussion is now being brought up, as I said again. Is it time to put an end to these?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll start off with asking you a question. Why don't we play the national anthem before the radio show? Because back in the 30s and 40s, we certainly did, or certainly not to start the program, to end the program. But that's not necessarily something that the listeners were looking for anymore, and sort of went the way of the dodo bird. And, when we talk about the sport context, yes, there is a sort of tradition and nostalgia, but people need to sit back and ask themselves, where did this come from? Where did it start from? And, I do want to take us back almost 20 plus years now, 2 decades ago, to the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, probably more pertinent to our context here in Canada. But people were booing the U.S. anthem then as well. And what ended up happening was there was a lot of, unbeknownst to a lot of people, there was a lot of paid patriotism happening in the United States in particular. And so the Department of Defense, through its various arms, the National Guard, the Army, the Navy, they were spending millions of dollars to promote the national anthem, to have re-enlistment ceremonies, to have salute to service events. And so a lot of these things were paid acts of patriotism. And it's indicative of the military-industrial complex just really, exercising its might. But again, when Toronto's playing Winnipeg or Montreal is playing Ottawa, these are cities, not countries. I can understand the argument if Canada's playing the U.S. or, we have the Four Nations Cup coming up, Canada's going to play Sweden in a couple of days. But why city versus city? If each individual team or city had its own anthem or fight song, that would be understandable. But the national anthem, I'm not so sure those two things are aligned with each other.
It's interesting when you look back historically, and I don't know where, when this first starts. Maybe in America, as you said, Second World War, it was a matter of patriotism back then. I think back to the Olympic Games, even in Berlin back in 1936, I guess it was, right? And the issue that then it was for the Third Reich, and this is what they were going to do and host the games, and everybody who was going to win was going to be, a German medalist. It's not 1930 anymore. In fact, it's not even post-Second World War anymore, where we're basically worried about this kind of stuff. Do you sense there's a growing momentum to finally get rid of this altogether?
Yeah, I think there is this growing sense of, I want to say libertarianism / kind of independence, especially in this attention economy that everyone's in, where time is very scarce. Time is short, and people want their entertainment value. They want it quick. And so when you're spending, hundreds of dollars, in some cases thousands, to be at an event, you're not there for the 3-minute, pomp and circumstance of the anthem anymore. You want to see, Austin Matthews. You want to see Cole Caulfield. You want to see Mark Scheifele. You want to see Marie-Philippe Poulin. Like, you're not there for the anthem. Now, that could also be a social mores and a malaise on the lack of patriotism. But if anything, I would argue this, that the question of tariffs has significantly increased patriotism in this country almost overnight. Whether the tariffs have gone through or not, and certainly, we're talking now about aluminum and steel tariffs, but just the threat of us against you and isolationism instead of globalism, that's created the sense of hardening our patriotism as Canadians anyways. And so do we need it before a sporting event? I'm not so sure. Do we need it before the school day starts? Maybe not. Do we need it before we get our hair cut, or before the radio station starts its programming? Before a television show starts its day? These are the questions we ask ourselves. Why this, but not that? And when we really start to peel back the curtain and peel the banana, we might go, yeah, you know what? It actually doesn't make sense anymore. And maybe so the social desirability of this one thing, it doesn't mean that we're any less patriotic. It doesn't mean that we're any less Canadian. What it means is we're here to play or here to watch sport or play sport. Let's get going here. Let's get down to business and do what we came to do. But to your point, if we were talking about the Olympics, if we're talking about whether it's 1936 or 2026, that's country on country. That makes sense. Those are the sonic symbols of those countries. If we have a Toronto anthem or a Montreal anthem, or even look at collegiate sport in the United States, each school has its
Right.
own fight song. Each university here in Canada, for that matter, has its own fight song. It's just not purported or pandered as much as it should be. Now, if we go back to those, nostalgic pieces, that makes sense in context. For a city team, for a provincial team to utilize the national anthem seems to me a bridge too far.
Yeah, I like that idea. So we'll get a whole bunch of singers, songwriters, et cetera, to put songs together for the individual cities they're from, which then would make sense. I like that idea. Also want to know where you get your haircut that they play the anthem before you sit in the chair.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a place on planet Earth that does that. But I will say this, in places like England, same thing. If it was Liverpool versus Man United, they're not playing they're not playing God Save the King
Right.
before that game. They're playing the fight song of the teams, or, they're saying, you'll never walk alone in Liverpool, et cetera, et cetera. In Australia, they do this. This might be the happy medium, perhaps. Australian rules football teams have their own fight song. They save the national anthem for the playoffs. So, and for them, it means more during the playoffs period than it does just during the regular season. But again, I still think that, when you really peel back the curtain here, there's really no reason why we should be doing it for sporting events and even school, but not doing it for radio stations, television stations, or even, getting your hair cut. So we got to, it's sort of like tipping. Why do we tip for certain circumstances and not others? If we really need to start to be critical as a society about why we do the things that we do. And, although politics and sport are intertwined, and we'll never be able to get rid of politics from sport, we should probably cut out the 3 to 4 minutes of dead time before a game, and let's just get the game going.
But so just how do you answer? Because I know some people think, no, this is important. I read some athletes in this article suggesting, no, we listen to music in the dressing room, and then that's when things change, is when we hear the anthem. It kind of gets them all psyched up. And some will say it also basically, restores your sense of pride or grows your sense of pride. Is that a fair argument?
Those are arguments, and some of them are fair. The one argument I'll counter is the physiological one. Obviously, I'm not a physiologist, but the science has been quite clear that any sort of sonic symbol, whether it's music, whether it's an anthem, there's no research that suggests that the anthem has a stronger physiological response on the athlete than if they were to listen to a song from Celine Dion. And they may say, they're in their lived experience, oh, no, the anthem gets me going, not Celine Dion. But runners, athletes, any elite athlete will tell you that the music that they like will get them to get their juices flowing. So it could be a Drake song, it could be Kendrick Lamar, it could be Celine Dion, whatever their jam. The anthem doesn't necessarily give them a better. They may say it does, but that's just like saying, that the home field advantage will give you a 1% better chance. The anthem does not give you a 1% better chance of performing better. It's listening to music and stop. That'll do that. And will we become any less patriotic if we stop listening to the anthem before a sporting event? No. Because guess what? When I go to Tim Hortons and get my double-double, I feel pretty Canadian, and I don't think about the fact that my cashier didn't sing the anthem before they handed me my Timbits.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate the time today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.